how do you do IoT right? That's a question to be asked to a company that knows what they're doing and have been doing that for a long time. Acuity Brands has been around for 100 plus years, and that's a high-tech company doing smart buildings, smart lighting, and more. Carl Coken is leading their engineering teams, and he's working on IoT and digital twins. And Carl has a lot to say about how to do IoT right. Hi everyone, this is the IoT Show. I'm Olivier, your host. Today with Carl, we will discuss the actual real objective of IoT projects, which is what, Carl? Well, we'll get to that
Actually
question,
solve
Carl.
a customer problem. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. We're starting with the problem. But before we state the problem statement, right? How about you introduce yourself? Hey, Carl, who is Carl?
Yeah. So thanks. So I'm Carl Coken. I'm the Vice President of Engineering for Acuity Brands and over our Atrius product family. So Acuity Brands is probably over 100 years old as a commercial lighting company. And been selling lights to hospitals. They do street lights, not so much residential, but office buildings and public buildings. A number of years ago, decided to expand out into smart buildings, intelligent spaces, and formed the Intelligent Spaces Group, which is what I'm part of, and the Atrius product line is part of. The whole intent is really wrapped around how do we help customers make their spaces smarter. How do we make it so that those spaces are also safer, but also more efficient or greener too?
That makes sense. It's always something that I find interesting that a cutting edge technology company is over 100 years old,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
Still,
and it's fun because not coming from the commercial lighting space, learning more about all the things that they're doing to stay innovative on that side, but how much effort goes into actually making sure that you can control the lights in a way that makes sense. Because if you take a look at a building, significant percentage of the power utilization in a building is for lighting, of course, for heating and cooling, but also lighting. And then if you look at municipalities, probably most municipalities spend more on lighting than on pretty much anything else in their budget, other than maybe schools.
that's interesting. Well, and that's a good example of the kind of knowledge you acquire when working with this kind of companies. And there is more and more IoT involved in these domains of smart buildings, smart cities, smart lighting. So you're exposed to a lot of IoT projects. So, like, is it fair to say that you're dealing with IoT on a daily basis, right?
Oh, absolutely. So part of the challenge is how do you collect up all of this data, right, and then be able to put it into something that's meaningful for the customer. And it really comes back to what's the actual problem the customer wants to solve. And so we're collecting data from all the number of sensors around buildings, from the lights, from the HVAC controllers and the valves. But also for one of our products, Atrius Energy, we're collecting the billing data too. So they understand how much the power utilization is costing them and where.
That's interesting. So data from IoT devices, data from the billing, correlating these. So you were saying that the focus has to be on the customer needs, like their objective. What is the problem they're trying to solve? And by experience, and you have the same experience as well, we're seeing too many IoT projects fail because it's IoT for the sake of IoT or technology for the sake of technology, or someone was putting together a very smart architecture. It was collecting data, but no one is doing anything with that data. It's just like sitting there.
Right.
In the realm of commercial lighting, smart buildings that you know really well, do you have some examples of fails, of that type?
Well, it is interesting because when you take a look at what's happened in the building space, the pandemic exposed a lot of interesting challenges. If you see some of the research, it turned out that during the pandemic, when no one was in the building, they were using the same amount of power that they were pre-pandemic, and it never changed. And so initially, I thought that was, the building manager must be a dummy, right? He's not changing the schedules. What the heck's going on? But then when you sit down, you talk to the building managers, talk to the integrators that work with them, it turns out that it's actually the lease agreement they have with the tenant. So with a tenant actually dictated to the building manager, you have to keep my temperature within a certain range at a certain period of time of the year. You have to keep the lights at a certain range during different times of the day and turn them off at different times of the day. So the building manager actually had no choice. They couldn't do anything about it. So, and because a lot of this was all manual, you'd have to go into the building to go and actually use the application that talks to the controllers. It also added to some of the challenges in that space. The other thing I thought was really funny was the way they figured out that nobody was in the building was they looked at water usage. So you look at power usage when was basically flat. Water usage went straight down. Nobody's using the bathrooms. Nobody's making coffee, right?
What you're pointing at, what I think is one of the best scenarios for a smart lighting system, which is turning off when there's no one.
Right. And so that's the point, is that you want to make sure that you either turn it off or dim it down far enough that it's using a lot less power. So you may want to keep lighting up for safety purposes in a particular floor or building, but you don't want to have it 100% all the time when no one's there. You don't want you don't necessarily want to have the heat on in the middle of winter if nobody's there. You do want it to have it on to a certain temperature so the pipes don't freeze, things like that. But you want to be smart about it. You want to do it based off of what's going on. So that's the challenge, right? Is you have to talk to the customer to understand a bit more about what the problem really is. And really the only way to do that is to spend time understanding how they do their job and what kinds of challenges they run into when they're doing their job. They'll tell you what they want, but as you walk through it with them and you see how they do their job, you'll see something very different a lot of times. So one of the examples was that we do a ESG reporting solution, so carbon emissions reporting solution. And what we found was that most customers, the sustainability officers or the sustainability managers, are gathering up all that data manually. And they're using spreadsheets to be able to calculate everything manually, which it takes them hours and hours. It takes them days to be able to do that. And then they've got to figure out how to maintain it. And then they've got to keep up with all of the different emissions factors that are out there. And then if they're spread out across the world, the regulations are different, the emissions factors are different, the reporting requirements are different. And so being able to collect up all the data and then be able to report it to them in a meaningful way in the format that's required by the different standards bodies, that eases up their burden. So now, instead of just collecting up the data and dropping it somewhere, you've actually taken it to the next step, which is automated doing something with it. When we're talking about the emission, the power utilization within a building and being able to change temperatures, you're right. I mean, a lot of folks, they're just collecting the data and you put it up on a dashboard and you say, look, isn't that great? You're using all this power. Well, that's fine, but what are you going to do about it, right? And what are you going to do to solve that customer's problem? You may not be able to change the temperature in the building beyond a certain range, but you can certainly drop it down to the bottom of that range automatically. You can also certainly tell the building manager, look, there's nobody been in the building for 3 days. Maybe you should contact the tenant and get them to agree to let you do something more intelligent with the building.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I know you and colleagues of yours and from your team came to the IoT in the past to tell us more about the technology that is underneath. I like that you're here to tell us about what it's for, because that's something that is key here.
Sure.
That said, I want to touch a little bit on technology here, because you said a couple of things that triggered a question that we had not planned here, which is great. I love this kind of things. Which is, we're talking about data coming from sensors, devices, actuators, but also you started talking about data coming from water billing or electricity billing or other things, right? And this is where, if you want to make sense of these different types of data, then you need some sort of digital twin. And I know you guys are heavy users of digital twins.
Yes.
And for this kind of use cases, this is exactly the kind of technology you need, right?
Absolutely. So you need to be able to do that relationship map, right? Where you understand that all of these things are on a particular floor in a particular building attached to a particular customer. And so you've got all the data coming in from the devices, but then being able to take the data from the bill to do the same thing and map it to the relationships that are there within the building to be able to say that, hey, we know that this particular building, this particular floor, it's costing us this amount for power. And then even taking it one step further to be able to say, we know where that power is being generated. Is it being generated by fossil fuels? Is it clean energy? How is this being generated and delivered to us, so that we can then the customer can then make some more interesting decisions. So it's the digital twin allows us to have that relationship map of what's going on within the building, so we can map disparate sets of data. So billing information to the digital instance or the digital view of what the building is, and
Mhm.
be able to make sense of that and be able to do more interesting things with it.
I find it fascinating that super modern technologies are helping 100 years old company that is at the edge of technology, and it's not a pun, or maybe I know, but it's very fascinating to see how the use of these super modern technologies help extend the knowledge. Like the company Equity Brands has been in the lighting business for a long time, and they're on top of it because they're adopting this kind of new technology that are helping them, but also because they're focused on the end goal, which is helping the customer. So tell me a bit more about these layers, the software, the services that
Sure.
Atrius offers, because that's your team, and I think it deserves some spotlight here.
Yeah, so I mean, underneath, we are primarily an Azure based solution, and so we built on top of IoT Hub to be able to bring in the data into the system, and then we're connected up to Azure Digital Twin. We're actually based off of Real Estate Core 4, and the reason we focused on Real Estate Core 4 was it's the integration of Rec and Brick. So we got both instances of it. We actually are sitting on the technical committee for Rec, because one of the things that we found was that the ontology didn't necessarily understand lighting, as an example. A lot of folks understood HVAC, and so we're helping to expand the ontology around lighting. And then we're taking all of that data, we're building out a data lake for us to be able to do better modeling of the information. And we're also bringing in refrigeration data. We acquired Key2 Therm, which is a refrigeration controls company, to bring that data in as well and be able to model what's going on with those as well, so that we can take that to the next step. And the next step being creating the inference models that allow us to do more interesting things with that information and do it in a more automated fashion. But even before then, we can use the query capability that's in ADX today. That's where our
Mhm.
historian is, and a lot of the telemetry data is in ADX, and so we can use the anomaly detection capabilities that are part of ADX to be able to surface information and in a near real time fashion for our customers. And the way we've structured everything is we've built a platform that we can then build applications on top of, so we can get the data once. So if we need to
Mhm.
integrate to a Distech, which is part of our division, a Distech Eclipse controller, or a Niagara-based controller, we do it once. It's available to all of our applications. We don't have to have them do it multiple times. All the data becomes available to all the different applications. So the more data we have, the easier it is for these applications to go build out what they want and focus in on the application, the logic that they need. And that allows us to build our energy reporting solution, our sustainability reporting solution. It also allows us to be able to do our location services, and then be able to go and expand past that to be able to do more facilities management. So
Interesting. It's interesting how I personally feel there's a tint from the wisdom of that. I want to say ancient company, but actually wisdom is the word.
well,
So
yeah,
to
I mean,
bring
it's
that back. But
yeah,
I think it's important because if the company has been living so long that there's a culture which is customer oriented and obsessed, I would say, and also the embracing of the right technology at the right place. And I know for knowing you and how things are working with you, that you take your time, but you pick the right things, right? After having look at them, tested them, because you don't want to go in a direction that is going to be a disaster,
Sure.
soon. And once again, like adopting technology for the sake of technology is not the right way. You definitely need to have a goal and then address this goal, right?
You do, and you also need to make sure that it's open, right? I mean, if you take a look at we one of the things that I got excited about with Acuity is that we have a lighting business, and it's the largest lighting commercial lighting provider in North America. We also have a controllers business. We call it an IoT gateway, right?
Hmm.
It is a gateway. It is intelligent. It's got an ARM SoC in there. It's got all the information is there, and it then interacts with all the devices. But it's also an open platform that can connect up to anybody else's devices, not just the Acuity ones. And then for us on the software side, being able to interface with Niagara, which is a solution that most controllers in the industry are using, allows us to be able to extend out to go talk to other controllers in the marketplace, whether they're from Honeywell or Siemens or any of the other vendors that are out there, and create open APIs because it's never a homogeneous world. There
Hmm.
are folks, we sell our software in Europe. They're most likely using somebody else's lighting systems in Europe. So we want to make sure that we can integrate with and get data from Signify, as an example. Or if they're using the Siemens controllers, we want to be able to get the data from the Siemens controllers. But all of it is, building out the solution, using what we've got internally to be able to prove it out, and
Nice.
then being able to expand it by using open interfaces to be able to, and industry standards to be able to talk to everything else. So you don't have to worry about, for our customers, being locked into a particular vendor solution that's only going to solve a problem if you've got their end-to-end stuff. That's not a help for anybody.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you take a look, our former employer, Microsoft, each pod of buildings had a different vendor because they were different for doing the chillers and doing the lighting because they were built at different times.
Hmm.
Um, but that doesn't change the fact that as a company, they want to be able to manage all of that and be able to interface with all of it. Every university is kind of similar, right? They've got a similar challenge. You build a campus, you've got everything is built up over time. So
Yep.
it's not just, I think that it's not just the fact that when we take a look at it, that we can go and work with our own stuff. It's having that open, using open standards, using the open interfaces, being able to interact with anything the customer has is another key part of when you build a solution. You don't want to build it just for a single use case or for a single set of hardware. And that's one of the other challenges we've seen in the marketplace is that a lot of the companies out there, when they build their IoT solution, they build it just to manage their and deal with their hardware. And they forget
Hmm.
about the rest. And that closes the opportunity off for their customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a last question for you, but what you just described for me is the title of the show, which is IoT done right.
Uh-huh.
It's the way you should do it. You should build it in a way that is open, that is future proof, and that serves the customer purpose and goals. And actually, before I let you go, who are your customers? Like, who are they? Are they like building builders or like universities? You were saying as well. So,
Sure.
what are the customers? A typical customer?
So we probably look at it in two big segments. It's commercial office building or commercial real estate, and then we also have large retailers.
Okay.
So if you look at those two, those are our two biggest. We do sell to educational institutions, so campuses, airports as well. But it's typically been large commercial real estate, so large buildings. That's the end customer. There's the management companies that actually are managing those buildings on behalf of those customers that are our partners that we work with, and then there's the system integrators that we also work with and partner with that are not the typical system integrators that tech companies work with. They're not the Accentures and the like. These are the lighting contractor. These are the folks that go and put the lights in, that go and put the HVAC systems in. We're working with them as well. So there's multiple channels into the customer, but the end customer tends to be two big buckets being commercial real estate, commercial offices, and then also the retailers.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So we'll actually add a link down there to atrius.com so that people can learn more about the solution and about how you do IoT right. Carl, that was very instructive. Thanks a lot for your time today. I hope to see you soon on the Outshift another topic at some point in the future. And well, we'll see each other again at our regular spots anyways, right?
I'm sure. Thanks for having me, all of you.
See you, Carl. See you, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.